So are we cool with Lando just parting out of the way, or what's the go there?
So we won't take any action during the race. We can review further afterwards.
Hey, that's not fair. I'm sorry, that's not fair.
Listen to the wind blow, watch the sun rise.
There are and will be repercussions for me to the end of the season.
And there's going to be contact between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris goes spinning round as well. There's a wheel off in the background. Big damage for the two McLarens though, as Max Verstappen steals the lead and runs away with it.
And if you don't love me now, you'll never love me again. I can still hear you say, never break the chain.
Max Verstappen round the final corner and takes the win of the United States Grand Prix. And with 5 races left to run, the title fight is well and truly on between not 2 but 3 drivers. First, there was contact in Singapore, then a race-ending collision in the US Sprint. Is the team harmony within McLaren finally reaching breaking point? Add a 4-time champion into the mix, and all of a sudden, we're talking about a 3-way fight for the world title. It's now Piastri against Norris against Verstappen as we head to Mexico City. I'm Harry Benjamin, and this is 5 Live Formula One. We'll get stuck into that chaotic US Grand Prix weekend for McLaren. How will it affect things coming to Mexico, and how much will they be feeling the heat from Max Verstappen? The drivers are speaking to the media as we speak, so we'll bring you the very best of what they say as and when they say it. Plus, we'll hear from McLaren's CEO, Zak Brown, and Cadillac team principal, Graham Loudon, ahead of their entry into F1 in 2026. Also, we'll bring you live updates from the football this evening, Europa League and Conference League games in action. But for now, over the course of the next hour or so, it is 5 Live F1, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by former Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer, the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, with journalist and co-host of the F1 podcast Inside the Piranha Club, Rebecca Clancy. Welcome all. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. Jolyon, let's start with you. We spoke with you last week on 5 Live ahead of the US Grand Prix, where we were talking about how McLaren keep the team harmony between Piastri and Norris. What are your thoughts now after the US Grand Prix?
I'm so in the mood for this. Just hearing the chain and the montage. I remember what a great season that we're in. But I don't think anything really changed between the McLaren drivers in terms of the harmony after Austin. There was obviously the contact between the two that wiped them out in the sprint, cost them another chunk of points. I don't think that's either of their faults, really, and I don't think there'll be any repercussions from that. But, you know, I think they've now, as much as they're watching each other, they've got to look at Max Verstappen, and that's the amazing thing. We're looking squarely at a 3-car, 3-driver title fight.
Yeah, Beck, would you agree Max Verstappen well and truly in this title fight now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I am totally up for this. Like Jolyon, actually, we were both dancing along to the chain. A shame you couldn't see us, but we were having a little jig. Yeah, I think Max Verstappen, to be honest, I think he's been in this title fight for a while. I'm going to say it. I'm just going to say it.
I did think you called it a couple of races ago, didn't you? I did
call it a couple of races ago, yeah, I did. I was in this comms box, I think back in Monza, maybe, was it? And...
with the gap at 104 points, you knew it.
It made sense, Jolyon, didn't it? It did. It just made sense. But it's Max Verstappen, and things weren't quite going. Okay, we come off the back of Oscar Piastri winning in Zandvoort, but there was just this feeling about him, wasn't there, that Max Verstappen, for me, he is in a class of his own. You know, no one else on the grid really comes near him. And when that car starts going in the right direction, as it has done, he has all the momentum. I think absolutely he's in the title fight. It's only 40 points, which sounds like a lot, but he scored 119 in the last 5 races, which is exactly the same amount as Piastri and Norris combined. So, yes, he absolutely is in this fight.
Yeah, Andrew, I mean, when Beck puts the numbers on it like that, and you could say, yes, all right, there is still an obstacle to overcome. We've still got 5 races and 2 sprints to go. But if anyone can do it, we've ruled him out before, and always to our peril, Max Verstappen is the man that could do it.
Well, it's the consistency of performance with Verstappen, isn't it? I mean, we've seen Norris and Piastri both have wobbles this year. When Verstappen gets the bit between his teeth, he just doesn't have wobbles. He has had some this year. He had a very, difficult race in Spain, for example, where he seemed to deliberately crash into George Russell, having sort of got himself in a strop about a penalty that Russell didn't get. But when it comes to this sort of situation, he's laser focused, and he is, as Beck says, I think everybody in Formula One agrees, the best driver in the world at the moment. And he is, he is an irresistible force when he's in this sort of mood. And I thought that for me, the most telling thing was that, for a bunch of races, he's been not talking about the championship at all, saying, I'm taking it race by race. And suddenly, after Austin, he said something like, it's on. So that, for me, that was the most telling thing, I think, that if even he thinks it's on and he's willing to say it, it's like, duh, 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 duh.
The shark attack is inbound.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
That is ominous, isn't it? And, there's no time to rest, really, from Austin, Texas to Mexico City this weekend. Jolyon, you've driven here in Formula One. You gained nearly 10 places in 2016, I believe. What's the circuit like?
Tough to overtake on, Harry. Really tough. But somehow you got to manage it. I have to say, in that race, I think I didn't even qualify. So I started from the back, pitted at the end of lap 1, and just survived to finish just outside the top 10. But it's the sort of race, it's high altitude is what everyone says when we go to Mexico. I've forgotten the official stat. Was it 4,000 meters?
Above sea level?
Yeah.
I've got 2,285, Jolyon.
Okay, I might have gone to a different metric. It's high. Anyway, let me just tell you, it's high.
It's 3 times the height of the Burj Khalifa. You can have that one.
Okay, we'll go with that. So that is everyone can reference. So what it means in layman's terms is you've got a track where, in theory, you've got a long straight, you've got a big braking zone, you've got some slow corners, some faster stuff. But because the air is thin, the downforce is very low. So everyone's sliding around all weekend. The slipstream is not that effective, which is why overtaking is a little bit difficult. But you can make a lot of mistakes very easily. You do get some chances to overtake with DRS and those big braking zones. We've seen a few flashpoints in recent years. At turn 1, then there's turn 4 are the 2 big chances, and it's very easy to drop it in the middle sector, which is your kind of quicker meandering corners with some big curbs. And Harry, let me tell you about the baseball stadium in the final sector, which is a cauldron of an atmosphere.
Ooh, a cauldron of atmosphere. Lovely work, Jolyon, once again. Max Verstappen certainly laps up the atmosphere, though. He's won here on 5 occasions, more than anyone else. He's currently on a run of 3 wins in the last 4 Grand Prix. So we talk about ominous. The stats are very much going his way. Before we really get stuck in, let's remind you how the championship is actually looking. Oscar Piastri sits at the top of the driver's standings on 346 points. Lando Norris is now just 14 points behind. The gap was at 34 points after the Dutch Grand Prix 5 rounds ago. This is the incredible part. When we left Zandvoort back in August, and Beck was alluding to the points difference, Max Verstappen was 104 points adrift of Piastri. In the 4 races since, Verstappen's gained 64 points on the Australian and is now just 40 points behind. A reminder that McLaren have already wrapped up the Constructors' Championship. There's still a battle going on for second between Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull are quite close, and a tight midfield scrap further back. But really, there's only one place to start properly then, and it's a 3-horse title race. And I think there's really kind of 3 pillars to look at here. You've got Red Bull's resurgence, you've got McLaren's form on and off the track, and then we've got the remaining races that make up the calendar. So I want to start with Red Bull's resurgence. And if we look back in the 4 races prior to the Dutch Grand Prix, Verstappen retired in Austria, finished 5th at Silverstone, 4th in Belgium and 9th in Hungary in what was a rough weekend for Red Bull. In the middle of that period, after Silverstone, Christian Horner was sacked as team principal. Since Hungary, Verstappen has finished 2nd in Zandvoort. He's won in Italy and Azerbaijan, finished 2nd in Singapore, and of course won both the sprint and the Grand Prix in Austin. So Andrew, what is behind the turnaround?
Well, a couple of things, really. It works on both sides. So Red Bull, the Italian Grand Prix, which was the one after the Dutch Grand Prix, they introduced a new front wing and a new floor design. And they've given together the car a balance that Verstappen really likes. And so balance is everything with this current generation of Formula One cars. So he's basically just gone faster as a result of that. And there's been a couple of different iterations of that front wing, but it's the same principle. So they've improved their car, in short. At the same time, McLaren have had a slightly difficult run of races. Particularly individual drivers. They in Baku, both drivers had a very difficult weekend, especially Piastri. Piastri had 3 crashes and jumped the start in Baku. It was like his worst weekend of the year, very uncharacteristic of him. He's been very consistent until that race. Then they bumped into each other at the first corner in Singapore. Norris pushed Piastri out of the way, basically, having hit the back of Verstappen. You could argue he was lucky not to break his front. Well, he did break his front wing, but not lucky not to break it badly enough to affect him. And that sort of swapped the positions, if you like. So I think Piastri would have ended up finishing second in that race rather than third had. Third rather than fourth in that race, because Russell won it, had that not happened. And then in Austin, of course, because of a mistake by Piastri in the sprint, both McLarens retired from the sprint. So Verstappen got 8 points on them there, and then of course he beat them in the Grand Prix as well. So it's the combination of difficult times for McLaren and Red Bull improving. But if McLaren could just sort themselves out and get back to the clean weekends that they were having before, I think they'll be okay. But the question is, when they're under this pressure, can they?
More on this in a moment, but there's action in the Europa League. Nottingham Forest against Porto. Charlie Slater.
With 52 minutes on the clock, the City ground bursts into life because though Porto thought they had equalised, it's been ruled out by VAR because Samu was offside in the build-up. Ball into the penalty area, bobbled about, pinball, saved by Sells. Samu involved at that stage. It fell to Bednarek, who slotted home. But it's been wiped out, and so it's still Nottingham Forest 1, Porto 0.
Conference League action. Crystal Palace are at Selhurst Park. Mark Scott.
And Harry, Palace have paid the price for not taking their chances. They're now behind Ike Larnaca. Ball given away by JD Camvo inside his own half. They sped up the field, and Riyad Bajic with a fine fire into the top corner. It's Palace 0, Ike Larnaca 1.
And let's head back to the Europa League. Celtic Park, Ailey Barber.
Celtic still trailing by that first half goal to 0, but they've had the best of the chances in this second half. Hatate teed himself up but volleyed over the top of the bar, and Benjamin Nygren has just been played in with a lovely floating ball over the top of the back line, but he just headed wide off the post. So Celtic trying to get themselves back into it here. Celtic 0, Sturm Graz 1.
We'll continue to bring you updates from the Europa League and Conference League games throughout the course of tonight's show. But back to the F1 action, and we're talking Red Bull resurgence. Andrew's just given us a nice sort of outline of what's happened so far and the reasons behind this turnaround, Beck. But that word momentum as well that we use so often when it comes to drivers and championships, that also seems like it's with Red Bull, even getting to a point where they can be quite cheeky. We saw some mind games in action over the course of the US Grand Prix.
Yeah, it's funny, that word momentum, isn't it? We've been using it quite a lot with Verstappen, and now he is the one using that word. In the preview that Red Bull put out, he was talking about how the momentum is in his favour, which I can't imagine Norris and Piastri were very happy to read about. But yeah, this was a funny one from Austin, wasn't it? So Red Bull got summoned up to the stewards after the end of the race and subsequently fined €50,000, and it wasn't entirely clear what for until we found out that it was because they had tried to remove some tape from the wall next to Lando Norris's grid spot. And the reason that McLaren have put this tape there is because, as you can imagine with the halo, it's actually very difficult to see and get your reference point, and often drivers miss their grid slots. They get into trouble for it, and that's not what they want to do. So they put this tape up to try and help them. What Red Bull had done is one of their guys had run onto the track after they weren't allowed to be there, trying to pull this off. It turns out it's not actually the first time that they've been removing the tape of whoever their nearest competitor is. It's a bit of gamesmanship, isn't it? In fact, Oscar Piastri was just in the press conference now, and he called it gamesmanship as well. I don't love it. Isn't it a bit, I don't know, it feels a bit playground-esque.
Should we go with skullduggery?
Yeah, that's a good word for it, yeah.
I don't like it. Why, it is difficult to see your grid box in a Formula One car. They've made it easier in recent times. So there's a yellow marking line that the drivers can use as a reference point. That's been widened, but you sit very low in the car. The cockpit sides are very high. They've been like that for a while for safety reasons. As you say, Beck, they've introduced the halo. And there's a lot of gubbins around the car that make it quite difficult. You can't just peer over and see the asphalt next to your wheels. So it is difficult. Lando Norris, by the way, has also been pinged for this already this year. In Bahrain, he actually got a 5-second penalty for starting in front of his grid box. So it's something he obviously struggles with. And so McLaren, I think, they are literally in their rights to put a little bit of tape on the pit wall. It harms no one. It makes sure their driver can make the start, from the front of his grid box. I don't like the fact that Red Bull went to go and take it off. For me, that's not sporting. Beat them on the track, but let the guy start in his grid box.
It's a very Red Bull thing to do, though, Jolene, isn't it? And I mean,
it feels like a Red Bull of the Christian Horner days, don't you think, Andrew?
Well, there's a few things to say about that. So first of all, I'm told that Laurent Mekies, the new team principal, didn't know that this was going on. That's point one. Point two is there's actually nothing wrong with removing the tape. That's not what they were penalised for. They were penalised because they were on the grid at a time when they shouldn't have been, because it was taking them too long to do it. And the reason for that was that McLaren knew they were doing it and they were using tougher tape this time. So now, and even funnier than that, now, I happened to have breakfast with a very senior person at Red Bull in Austin on Monday, and they were saying that they were talking about it afterwards, and they're thinking maybe they'll just put loads of tape on instead of just pulling that one off, so it looks like a kind of barcode on the pit wall next to whoever it is next to Verstappen on the grid.
But it's ridiculous, isn't it? It's just a bit
petty,
churlish, it's petty, it's skullduggery. I'm with Jolien. Do your talking on the track. It's just a bit ridiculous.
Once again, most things come back to good old-fashioned gaffer tape. I think there's a sponsor lined up there somewhere for the teams. Let's head back, though, to Celtic Park. Ailey Barber.
Because Celtic have levelled things here against Sturm Graz from a very quickly, well-worked taken corner. Liam Scales up from the back. Slight deflection on the shot, but the supporters inside here don't care one bit. It's now Celtic 1, Sturm Graz 1.
Thanks, Ailey. We'll look at the Formula 1 races coming up shortly, and where points can be won and lost. But Max Verstappen, obviously good enough to win every race between now and the end of the season, isn't he?
Yep.
Of course.
Categorically.
Yeah, it's just a question of whether McLaren can get themselves back into a competitive position. And also, I mean, there is an interesting question here as well. Of course, McLaren are determined to allow their drivers to race fairly and equally for the championship and not intervene. But Alex Albon, the Williams driver, was saying today that actually, the easiest way to fend Verstappen off will be to focus on one driver. But they're not going to do that. And I remember I interviewed Piastri back in Monaco and asked him about this exact threat from, are they not worried that Verstappen could come through the middle of them and beat them? And they said, he said, yes, that could happen, but we're prepared to accept that risk.
There will be a massive egg on the face of McLaren if they let their drivers fight it out, which they will do because they've come this far in we've done many a podcast, a debate on McLaren and their team ethics and racing rules. But if they let them race and they get gazumped by Verstappen in the final race, it will feel like shades of McLaren in 2007, but for very different reasons. When Kimi Raikkonen snaffled the championship from Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso by 1 point on the final day, when he was pretty much out of contention. But this one feels like it's even worse because McLaren are going out of their way so much to manipulate positions. After the Singapore incident, which was really a fairly nothingy moment in the grand scheme, but now there's repercussions for Norris, which seem to be that that Piastri is going to have preference for qualifying for the rest of the season in terms of going behind Norris, taking the most out of track evolution, taking a little bit of a slipstream at times as well if he wants it. But even that already has maybe already hurt Norris. In Austin, where he was just 700ths away from sprint qualifying pole. Maybe if it had gone later, that might have been there already. But the way that they're manipulating it is just giving it to Verstappen at the moment. He must be licking his lips.
Another goal at Celtic Park. Ailey Barber.
What a turnaround. 2 goals in the space of a couple of minutes, both from corners. This time it was Benjamin Nygren rising high. He's missed a couple of easier headers. He didn't miss that one. It's Celtic 2, Sturm Graz 1.
And more action from that as we head through this programme, 5 Live F1. So we talk about McLaren now, and really that's kind of the second pillar here. And it almost feels like they are sort of overcomplicating things by having this, sea of fairness that they have to split the two drivers. You mentioned repercussions. Now, this was how Oscar Piastri responded when asked by Tom Clarkson in the FIA press conference whether his approach is changing with the looming threat of Max Verstappen and Lando Norris.
It's not, to be honest. I think, obviously the gap has shrunk a little bit in the last few races, but for me, the focus has always been on just trying to go as fast as I can and get the most out of every weekend, which in some of the weekends we have, in some of them we definitely haven't. So that's really all I'm focused on. And I think if I do a good enough job of getting on top of that every weekend, then it doesn't really matter what the picture looks like.
Hunter or hunted? What do you prefer?
Both have their positives and negatives. I think, obviously it's, everyone likes a good underdog story, or, trying to come back is sometimes a bit easier, but I'd rather have the championship lead than be in any other spot. So, I've always kind of said I enjoy that because it normally means you're doing something right. And I think through the course of the season, we have done a lot of things right, and there's some things that we can still do even better.
Scoring points in every race is obviously crucial. So, no more sprints like in Austin. Have you reviewed what happened on the Saturday in Austin, and are there any repercussions for either you or Lando this weekend?
We've gone through it again. We go through every weekend, regardless of what's happened. And, I think there is a degree of responsibility from my side in the sprint. We're starting this weekend with a clean slate for both of us. So, just going out and racing and see who can come out on top.
Oscar Piastri speaking in the press conference just moments ago. So, Andrew, that's really interesting hearing from Oscar Piastri there. And it sounds like when he says clean slate, that all this talk of repercussions, can we read into that as well? There are none for either driver now. It's how about it, all even?
Correct. He was actually asked specifically to clarify that later in the press conference, and he said the consequences have been removed on Lando's side, whatever that was. They haven't been absolutely clear, by the way, McLaren, what they are. The closest we've got from them officially is an interview I did with Zach Brown, some of which we're going to hear a bit later, the chief executive officer, where he said we're on the sporting side, and I said, was it something to do with the order that they go out in qualifying? Am I in the right ballpark? And he said, yes, you're in the right ballpark on that, but he didn't say explicitly what it was. Anyway, so back to square one. Job number one is for at least one of them to beat Verstappen this weekend.
Don't they have to stop with all this fairness? It's getting a bit ridiculous. Don't you? Now that they've sewn up the championship for themselves, the constructors, everyone's going to get their team bonuses now. They're all very happy. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the rest of the season. I know all of the glory is in the Drivers' Championship, though, and I know they absolutely do care about it. But slow pit stops are a part of racing, as Piastri said. And also, how have they not worked out how to stop doing them yet? Because it seems to be every single race we are having this conversation about a slow pit stop. Sport is unfair. It can be cruel, it can be brutal, but it can be absolutely brilliant. I think from the outside point of view, as we can say, sat here very comfortably, I think you just say to them, keep it clean, but otherwise, what happens within that 90 minutes, 2 hours on track, sort it out amongst yourselves. Just go for it.
I think it's a bit embarrassing, isn't it? All of this. Every week there's more McLaren, now there's repercussions, now there's fairness. Now, and every time we're talking about their internal driver policy. So it seems like then Oscar has taken some blame for the sprint start in Austin, which honestly I don't think he needs to do. From a driver's point of view, I felt like it was a plain and simple racing incident. Lando got a bad start. Oscar tried to go around the outside. Lando went in deep, so you get the switch back. Maybe there's a tiny element of risk in it at the first corner, but he left like more than about half the track on the inside, so he didn't exactly cut back for an apex, but there was just two drivers there, which he wouldn't have known. But anyway, it just feels like every weekend there's something that's going on between the drivers, and that's the narrative. And at some point, the drivers have got to start getting this level of elbows out with Verstappen, but they're all a little bit scared to do it because they're still watching each other.
So I think it's because they've got this policy of wanting to keep both drivers happy. They're trying to do something that no Formula One team has ever done before, which is have two drivers within the team competing for the championship and not falling out. You go back through history and every single time it ends up in a fight and one of them ends up leaving the team. Senna Prost, Hamilton Rosberg, Piquet Mansell. It's what happens. So Andrea Stella and Zach Brown, the two bosses of McLaren, they've decided they want to keep Norris and Piastri as a driver lineup long term. They don't want that fallout to happen, and so they think this is the only way they can do that. And so far, on that side of things, it's working. But of course, Jolyon's absolutely right. It is creating a lot of discussion. But, I think that maybe they would... both drivers have said that point I made about that Piastri made earlier to me in Monaco. Both Norris has said that subsequently too. So maybe they are prepared to accept it. And from the team's point of view, yes, they would lose face for sure if one of the drivers failed to win the championship this year. But in terms of the finances and the prestige of the team, in terms of the constructors, then they wouldn't. And I agree that the drivers has more prestige than the constructors in the wider public point of view. But I guess they just accepted that this is something that it's a risk they're prepared to take. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with it myself. I haven't thought about it in that much depth as to see what I would do if I was the team boss of McLaren, because I'm not.
I'd like to see you try, though. Yeah. Look, all action going on in the Europa League right now. There's been a red card at Celtic Park. Ellie Barber.
And Sturm Graz have gone from being a goal up and fairly comfortable to 2-1 down, and now down to 10 men. Toche Chukwueze going in high and late on Callum McGregor. He's been sent off, so it is Celtic 2, the 10 men of Sturm Graz 1.
Thanks, Ailey. We're going to hear from the big boss at McLaren in a moment, CEO Zach Brown. But Jolyon, Andrew there saying, this has never been done before, sort of these two protagonists within the same team fighting for the Drivers' Championship. McLaren are trying to do something that has not been done before. But is there a reason it has never been done before and that it can't happen? This is Formula One we're talking about.
Yeah, to be clear, they've fought before, but they've never been on happy terms at the end of the year before, the two teammates fighting for a title. And that's because you're fighting for the ultimate prize in Formula One, in motorsport. And this is the sort of thing where you dream as a kid of first of all, racing in Formula One. Second of all, trying to be a Formula One world champion. You're the best Formula One driver. You're the best driver in the world. And this is what it should all come down to. The ruthlessness you have to show to get on the grid in Formula One, let alone to stay there and cement yourself as a regular Formula One driver. And then to be a race winner and a champion, you have to be a killer. And so usually you get killer mentality in the top teams. We've seen it so many times in the past with Hamilton and Alonso fighting, Hamilton and Rosberg. They would do anything to walk away at the end of the year with that title. And Rosberg literally retired at the end of the season when he won it because he'd given so much to get underneath Hamilton's skin, and he walked away as a champion. This year, both drivers seem a little bit more magnanimous. They seem like it wouldn't really damage them to be second at the end of the year. I know they both want to win. Of course they want to win, but you see some of the antics in other title fights where drivers are so keen to win, they'll go the extra mile, they'll do this, they'll push the boundaries of what's acceptable. Whereas the McLaren drivers are more thinking, let's keep happy at McLaren long term, let's keep my nice contract in the next few years, hopefully we'll get another chance, and hopefully this year I win it just on pure talent rather than necessarily pushing the boundaries. Great for McLaren, but it's just different to how we've seen these all guns blazing battles in the past.
I would have expected the McLaren pair to be more like adopting the tactics of Red Bull as well, because this might be their only chance at a World Championship. We've got huge regulation changes coming in next year. This could be it for them. They might not be the top of the tree next season, so they have to go all in for this. And I agree with Jolyon. It doesn't really feel like the pair of Piastri and Norris quite want it as much as Verstappen seems to at this moment in time. I'm sure that's not true. I'm sure they absolutely do, as Jolyon could speak to a lot better F1 drivers' dream. But yeah, I don't know. This could be their only shot. They've got to go for it.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's hear from McLaren's CEO, Zach Brown. Andrew sat down with him in Austin prior to the sprint race. So before Norris and Piastri came together in the sprint and before Verstappen won both the sprint and Grand Prix. But Brown gave some interesting thoughts on how his team are managing the title battle.
Well, the reins are off. And I think that's somehow gotten lost in this, papaya rules, which was just a...
It's not even a term you use internally, I believe.
No, and had we just said, be careful, people wouldn't have gone, what's the be careful rule? Because everyone... So I think the papaya rules took on a life of its own, and it was nothing more than don't whack into each other. And, they've been free to race. I'll give you an example. Australia, totally free to race. Now you're in the race. It's half wet. It's half dry. We're coming up on traffic. We're absolutely dominating. So, guys, let's hit the pause button for a second because we don't want to use our tires up if we're going to stay on these tires. We're coming up on traffic. Track's half damp. We've got such a lead. Let's not force each other into a double DNF when we should be able to just cruise home. That then gets interpreted. They didn't let them race in Australia. And it was like, well, they were totally ready. There was just like a small moment in time where it was just using some common sense. So they've been free to race the whole time. You've seen Oscar make a pretty aggressive move in Austria and in Hungary. And, the message on the radio was, hey, just kind of be careful. That was a little bit close. So they've been free to race. We've said it 1,000 times, but for some reason, either people don't believe it or don't understand it. And they have been free to race, and they'll continue to free to race, and the reins are off.
Fairness is a word that you've used, Andrea's used in the context of this fight. You're trying to be fair to each driver, and yet somehow out there in the paddock there are people who think maybe Lando's being favoured by the team because a lot of these incidents have sort of gone in his direction, if you like. Whether it be strategy in Hungary or the pit stop thing in Monza or even in Singapore, some people would argue. And people are saying that that's because of this, what they perceive to be a business or managerial relationship that you have with Lando. What would you say to all of that?
Nonsense. But let me clarify that a little bit more. I have no, business managerial. I've heard like George and Merck and kind of, I don't know all the details, but that sounds like a managerial relationship, might compromise, I've got none of that with Lando. You take Hungary as an example. I was on pit wall. That was a free punt because of how the race was playing out. And I wish Netflix was here now because you'll hear the pit wall conversation. Andrea and I were like, this ain't going to work. But it was a free punt. And Lando drove brilliantly. And had that been any other track where passing was a little bit easier, I don't think it would have worked. Right? It was just a track that you can't pass on. But clearly, Oscar was on the better strategy. And had it been Silverstone, I don't think Lando would have been able to defend that. So that's just kind of how the chips fall. So you're right. It appears the couple incidents that have happened most recently have kind of fallen Lando's way. Hungary, that was on pit wall. We didn't think that was going to work for Lando, and it did, and hats off to him. He drove brilliantly, and instead of people going, wow, Lando drove brilliantly, it's like, oh, they gave Lando the better strategy. That's not what we thought at the time. The situation in Monza, we have with the lead car, that was Lando, just like happened in Hungary the year before. If the lead car is prepared to sacrifice their rights to the first call to help his teammate that's actually his number one competitor in the championship, that's great teamwork. And we did that to protect Oscar, which actually is to the detriment of Lando in an out-and-out race. Then we had the pit stop issue. Everyone thinks we reversed the order because of the pit stop. That actually had nothing to do with it. So the challenge then becomes for us is you almost can't explain everything all the time and people jump to the conclusion. So I understand what it looks like from the outside, but it's not what's going on the inside. And we're trying so hard to give them equal opportunity and let them race hard. I wish everyone recognized more of that, but I've definitely come to the conclusion there's too many fans with too many views that we just got to be comfortable with how we're going racing inside McLaren, and that's what's most important to us.
All right, Zach, just how do you expect the rest of the season to go? Do you think you're going to keep them all together and keep everything harmonious?
Yeah, and but it's going to be brutal. This Max guy, he's relentless. So I'm more focused on making sure he doesn't get himself any more in the game than he already is, because our goal is to finish 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship, give our guys equal opportunity to decide who's first, who's second. What we really don't want is that Max guy getting in the middle of our fun.
Zak Brown, the CEO of McLaren, speaking with Andrew Benson. Let's head back to the Europa League. There's been a penalty at Forest. Charlie Slater.
There has 76 minutes on the clock, and Nottingham Forest have their second penalty of the game. An element of controversy to this one. Savona went down in the penalty area. Initially, the referee booked him for simulation, but VAR said, hang on a moment, come and have a look at the monitor. We think you've got this wrong. He had a quick look and changed his mind. It is a penalty in front of the Trent end with 76 minutes on the clock. Igor Jesus, Brazilian summer signing from Botafogo, stands over the ball. Huge moment, you fancy, as this would put a real seal of approval on Sean Dyche's first game in charge at the City Ground. The referee is making sure all the players are outside of the penalty area. They are now. He blows his whistle, and here comes Igor Jesus. Long run up, right-footed, scores! Nottingham Forest 2, Porto 0, straight down the middle, straight into the points with a win you would fancy from here in Sean Dyche's first game in charge. Forest 2, Porto 0.
Thanks, Charlie. Big evening at the City Ground. Right, we just heard from Zak Brown a few moments ago, the CEO of McLaren, speaking with Andrew Benson. Worth noting it was Andrea Stella, the team principal, that Zak was referencing to a few times there. Interesting, Andrew, that this interview happened obviously on the Saturday morning in Austin, and he was still very aware of Verstappen's threat, even though at the time he was 63 points back from Piastri, now just 40 points. What did you pick up from your chat with Zak once you left him?
Well, the worst thing was it was only about 2 hours before the sprint, and then the incident happened on the first corner.
He's not speaking to you again,
and
is he?
I thought, well, that's that interview out of the window, isn't it? And so I only used a little bit of it online. It works a bit better, I think, what has been cut for the radio there. I mean, it's just a reiteration of everything that they've been saying all season, Zak Brown and Andrea Stella, isn't it? And you know, we've been discussing it already on the lead up to the interview, so I don't really know what more to say about it other than you know, there's jeopardy in Formula 1 no matter which way you go. You know, in a nutshell, if they back Piastri now, they're going to have one mightily annoyed guy in the other car, because he'd quite rightly be going, well, hang on, I'm only 14 points behind. Why? Well, right, have you got to take my chance of winning the World Championship away from me? On the other hand, if they let them race, then Max Verstappen may well, as I said to Piastri in Monaco, drive through the middle of them and win the World Championship. But the bigger question really is not about the team orders, I think. I think it's becoming almost, or lack of team orders, it's almost becoming a distraction from the fact that what they're not doing for the last 4 races is maximising their opportunities and their potential. If they'd done that, Verstappen would not have gained so many points on both drivers, especially with the Baku weekend. They've got to get back to working out what has been going wrong on a team and driver perspective, particularly Piastri, who's now had 2 difficult weekends in 3 in Baku and Austin. And if they can nail that, then I don't think they're going to have the advantage over Red Bull that they had for the middle part of the season anymore. But they should be able to fend him off. But they've lost it for a reason, and that's what the championship is now hanging on. It's finding that again.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because all of this talk about Max approaching the championship gain that he's made has been immense. He is relentless. He is the best driver in the field. I think most people would be agreed on that. But when you look at the last 3 races, you're right, Andrew, McLaren have been so at sea on so many different levels, so they've actually handed in the points. Okay, Piastri's crashed in Baku. That was a bad weekend for him. But I don't even know if the Red Bull car's really been better than the McLaren in these 3 races. But we've not seen a true contest. In Baku, you had a weird Q3 where it started raining. It was drying up right at the end. Norris was the first car. Verstappen was the last car. He had a good track advantage. And whilst Norris was starting way down the bottom end of the top 10, you had Verstappen on pole. Norris was then in traffic. Piastri crashed. We never saw the pace of the McLaren in Baku. The Red Bull was good. Then we had Singapore. The McLaren was the better car in Singapore. In qualifying, it was very close at least. Norris made a mistake at the end of his lap. Would have been right there with Verstappen. And clearly was quicker in the race, but was just out-qualified by Verstappen and couldn't pass him on a track it's really difficult to pass. And honestly, in Austin, I think the pace of the cars was very close. But the crash at the start of the sprint skewed things. McLaren then had to go cautious on the setup. They had absolutely no data on the race run. And from there, became less competitive. And even then, when you look at the race, Norris was every bit as quick as... He was actually quicker than Verstappen when he had free air. But we're coming back to things that are going wrong. Pit stops is obviously one. Norris's starts in Austin were not good. He obviously got a good one in Singapore to cause the drama. But for 2 races, starting alongside Verstappen, he was in no position to make a move. When in Austin, it's actually statistically very difficult to start from pole. Verstappen made it look very easy. So I think McLaren have the tools to get back to the front, but they've got to find the way of working where they're ticking the boxes again.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Jolyon, but I think it's also worth noting, we talk a lot about all the momentum being with Verstappen. The last 4 races, Norris has outperformed Piastri, which is why this gap is now down to 14 points. And to your point, Benny, how do McLaren choose? They can't simply go for the championship leader. It wouldn't be fair. There's Norris. Neither of them, let's just be brutal about this, neither Norris nor Piastri are as good as Verstappen. And I think ultimately this is where it comes down to. I think the machinery is fairly evenly matched. I think we head into Mexico. It's a Verstappen track. I think there's no getting away from that. He's won here 5 times. He is the most successful driver at this track. It just seems to suit them. I think Ferrari could probably be in the mix. We're going to come to them. But I just don't think either driver on the McLaren side is performing at the level they need to really bring the fight to Verstappen. But
Norris is now consistently quicker than Piastri.
Yes.
Which is where the tide is turning. If Piastri had Norris's performance, the gap would still... You'd be thinking Piastri's going to be champion. Yeah. But Norris has also been eating into that gap. 20 points he's taken off Piastri. So if you had to back one McLaren, if you had to, I really wouldn't know which one to back, because you think on natural pecking order right now, they're going to end up somewhere near a dead heat with 5 races to go. Norris closing, Verstappen quick, taking the points away, and 14 points over 5 races, he'll probably get there, but it's tight.
Is this on Oscar Piastri's side a little bit, Jolyon, inexperience coming through here compared to those around him? Obviously, he's never gone for a title before. This is only his 3rd season. When Lando's in his 7th, I think Max Verstappen is going on for a decade. Is that something to play here, and is that pressure starting to pile up on him?
There's an interesting thing here where, for the last couple of years, Norris has been the number 1 driver at McLaren. He has out-qualified Piastri so comfortably. He's had a good couple of tenths margin over him, and he's been clearly winning in the point stakes, and even more dramatically in qualifying. For most of this year, that form was flipped, and Piastri really surprised me in the first half of this year how much he had turned up, and it looked like he'd learned so much. Norris was very outspoken in how much he was struggling with the car. And it looked like, okay, Piastri year 3 has just found it. I'm starting to wonder if Norris is getting back to the usual pecking order at McLaren as the year's going on. He's getting more comfortable in the car. He's maybe getting less championship jitters that he had earlier on in the season. He's finding his rhythm, and we're getting back towards that Lando with a very slight advantage in 1 lap pace. Because you go to tracks like Austin, where we've just been, Piastri's never really been strong there. He's never been great in these general season run-in races compared to Norris, and that's where the form is right now. It was just kind of, you could say, surprising the first half of the year how much Piastri had stepped up.
Yeah, it's true that Norris has beaten Piastri in the last 4 races, but I'm not so sure the data set is big enough to be sure of the conclusion, because in Singapore, for example, okay, Norris finished ahead in the race, but Piastri qualified ahead. He was quicker than Norris in qualifying in Singapore. Not so in Monza, and as you say, Jolyon, in Austin, he's always struggled. So, and then we had Baku, where he seemed to be like a completely other driver. I don't know what happened to him there.
But if you look at qualifying, Norris would have been quicker than Piastri, but made a mistake in the final chicane. And then you look at the race in Singapore. Yeah, he did. Yeah. But if you look at the race in Singapore, it's difficult to say that Piastri was even as quick as Norris, when Norris was hounding Verstappen and Piastri could get nowhere near Norris.
Yeah, I agree. But if Piastri had been ahead of Norris, then he probably would have finished ahead of him in the race, right? So if
but not by virtue of having more pace.
I don't know, because of course you don't know. I agree. I'm just saying that it's only 4 races and there's been some weirdness in that 4 races, and it does look like, I agree with you, it does look like Norris has got back to that form of the previous 2 years. But I think, for me, I just want a little bit more evidence as to whether that is going to continue for the rest of the season or not.
Andrew wants more evidence, and I think that's fair enough for Benson's data. I wonder, though, if we just move it on a little bit to what we might see this weekend. We have rightly talked about the 3 main protagonists for this championship and how they may or may not take points of each other. But Beck, can we look at Mercedes or even Ferrari, who, yes, are not in the championship fight, but Ferrari sprung up on the podium. They split the 2 McLarens last time out in Austin. Mercedes have taken a couple of Grand Prix victories this year. Could they come and spoil the party this weekend and play a role in this championship towards the end?
100% yes. I think George Russell at Mercedes is having the season of his life. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. Actually, I've been having conversations with people asking if George Russell was in a McLaren, would he be leading the World Championship? There's one for you to ponder. I just think George Russell is absolutely in the mix. He's been stealing, in fact, not even stealing them, getting them on merit. He's on the podium. Ferrari, they won here last year, actually, in Mexico. Carlos Sainz behind the wheel that time. They haven't actually won a race since then. But I think there is absolutely no reason they can't be in the mix. Lewis Hamilton left Austin happy. And that's not a normal thing for him this season on a Sunday. Normally he's not really sure what's going on in the car, doesn't really like the performance, he's not getting the results. Obviously he's definitely been outclassed by Charles Leclerc this year. But actually he left saying, I think we're heading in the right direction. And that's a great sign for Ferrari. Shame they've only got 5 races left with this car. But it does appear like those drivers are finally, the Ferrari drivers are finally finding a bit of confidence in that car. So absolutely they're in the mix.
I don't see a Ferrari winning a race this year on merit against a Red Bull or a McLaren, whichever's the quicker of those 2 cars. Maybe they can get in the mix a bit with the slower of whichever is the 3rd ranking of those drivers at the weekend. On a particular weekend, I can, however, see Russell winning in Las Vegas, for example, because it's that sort of track. He won in Singapore, he won in Canada. That's the next track where Mercedes. They won there last year, let's not forget. It's got a big red sign over it saying Russell wins in Las Vegas again. But I don't see either of them consistently beating a Verstappen-driven Red Bull or a McLaren for the rest of the year, but maybe I'm wrong.
I could see Lewis Hamilton winning in Brazil. It's
I was
one of those
just
tracks,
about to mention that.
It's one of those tracks. He's an honorary Brazilian, isn't he? He's just something special about that place for him.
But what's interesting, even in Austin, Ferrari weren't really that competitive. They were okay in the race, but they meddled with the race order, didn't they? And I think we're going to see the Ferraris, we're going to see George Russell, even if they can't win the race, they'll be a factor. Having Leclerc between Verstappen and Norris, it handed it to Verstappen. Probably he would have won it anyway, but it made it very easy for him, and it nearly cost Norris another 3 points. So they'll be a factor, even if it's not winning races.
But also, I suppose, ultimately, it's another thing for particularly McLaren just to think about when, now, okay, it doesn't seem like there's any repercussions, but just when it comes to this overthinking business and trying to control and be fair, you have to bear in mind that, okay, they're not fighting for the wins, but they can be up there, and Mercedes and Ferrari can take points off either the McLaren or the Red Bull drivers.
They don't have the luxury of no one coming for them. We can go back to the years of dominance of Mercedes, of Max Verstappen walking it with Red Bull, and unfortunately for McLaren, yes, their car was dominant and they won the championship with 6 races to go, but we talk. Jolyon was talking there about Leclerc and Norris, but Russell could have done some more damage to Piastri in Austin if he could have, just couldn't manage those tyres in the end. He could have taken some extra points out of Piastri as well. So I think it's going to be an interesting run-in. I think McLaren have got an enormous headache, and I think there's a very good reason they don't pay any of us the millions to make the decisions.
Not yet. Andrew Benson's gunning for team principal, I think, at McLaren. That was confirmed earlier. Actually, one thing to bear in mind, and what we're going to see this weekend when it comes to Sunday's Grand Prix action, but even before that, on Friday, we're going to have 9 rookies taking part in FP1. One of them is going to be the Mexican Pato O'Ward, who's going to be in for Lando Norris. I just wonder, though, how much of that might weigh on either driver feeling, Norris in particular, because he's the one missing the session, feeling aggrieved, and in this overall championship battle, when you're putting a rookie in for an FP1, that's crucial track time gone.
I have to say, I'm presuming Pato O'Ward is paying some money for his role at McLaren, and that part of that money is a deal that he drives in P1 in Mexico. But if I was Zak Brown, I would be saying, sorry, buddy, not this time. Got to give the race drivers, we've got a World Championship to win.
FP1 denied. Of course, it's a rule in Formula One that for this year at least, each team must run 2 rookies across the season. So Mexico towards the end normally sees a huge influx of them, and we have got 9. That's what we're seeing on Friday at least. Jolyon, Sunday's Grand Prix. What's happening? What are we seeing?
So what we're seeing is the big guns starting at the front. They'll all be on the front 2 rows, the top 3 that we've discussed about for an hour. But the interesting thing is, it doesn't really matter where they qualify with that order. If they're all on the front 2 rows, I reckon if we put our heads together, you'd imagine that Verstappen's going to be hard to stop, because the run to the first corner in Mexico is so long. Last year, he took the lead from second on the grid. Before, he's taken the lead from pole. I remember when he raced with Lewis Hamilton in 21, he took the lead from third on the grid. And he's in this sort of form where I think that's going to be, the run to the first corner is going to be where Verstappen, wherever he qualifies, is going to be so strong and difficult to stop. And he just seems to be finding the form, finding the break points, getting the racecraft well. So can anyone stop him? I don't know.
Full time at Celtic, Ailey Barber.
Dig very deep after a first half hour that saw them lose both Iheanacho and Johnson to injury. Goal down after a stunning strike from Tommy Horvat, but they slowly found a way into things. Came out second half strongly, created and missed numerous chances before Liam Scales fired them level from a quick corner. Then 2 minutes later, from another corner, Ben Nygren headed them into the lead. Sturm Graz went down to 10. Ciccone sent off for a high challenge, but Celtic hung on for their first win to move into the top 24. It finished at Celtic Park. Celtic 2, Sturm Graz 1.
Good evening for Celtic. Thank you very much, Ailey Barber. Beck, you were smiling along there to Jolyon a few moments ago.
Because I was thinking of the quotes from Helmut Marko, the Red Bull advisor, who was saying about how when the Red Bull wasn't performing before the summer break, he was saying Verstappen just wasn't that bothered, he wasn't enjoying it. And they were kind of discussing what he could do to get his almost mojo back for racing. And so he went off and did the Nordschleife. And obviously he had to qualify, and then he went and won it. That was post Monza, pre-Singapore. And Marko was saying that since he's come back from the Nordschleife, he's absolutely loving life. We know that Red Bull have had a bit of a different approach to their weekends since Horner has left and Mekies has come in as team principal, as in they listen to the driver a lot more now and not quite so reliant on data. But isn't that a terrifying prospect? Now Verstappen's decided that actually he's in this championship fight. He can see what's going on at McLaren. He can see that the door is, quite frankly, wide open for him to march through and take this championship. He's up for it. So yeah, like Jolyon, I can imagine him taking a look down to the first corner, wherever he's starting on the grid, and just going, out the way, boys, this is mine.
Thing is, when Verstappen smells blood, he just eats his prey, doesn't he? I mean, we've seen him in Formula One for a decade. Have you ever seen him really want something and not get it? And he will be ruthless. He will be, his team will be tearing off the tape, off the McLaren pit, off the pit wall for Lando Norris. He will do anything. We saw it in 21. He is that driver that will make an absolute enemy of a friend to make sure he's the champion. And that's the feeling when he's starting on the front 3, you think he's gonna, through hell or high water, end this in first position.
Yeah, well, that will certainly be something we're going to keep an eye on. It's a 1.2 kilometre run down towards turn 1, that right-hander. So anything can happen. I don't think I actually got a prediction from you, Palmer, and I'll ask Beck and Andrew as well. Who's winning on Sunday?
Well, no, it was Verstappen that I was alluding to with my very Verstappenish comment.
I just wanted to just say it, though.
Yeah, confirmed. I'm going to stick with Verstappen to keep the roll going.
OK, that's a Verstappen from Palmer. Benson, you're up next.
Verstappen, Piastri, Norris.
Whoa, turning of the tide at McLaren.
Beck, come on.
I think Verstappen, Norris, Piastri.
OK, let's go.
Actually, no, can I change my mind?
We'll allow it. We'll allow it.
Verstappen, Norris, Russell.
Okay, I'm going to go for Norris, and I think there's going to be contact in turn 1 on lap 1 again that might involve a couple of the big hitters. So I'm going to go for Norris wins with Russell and Leclerc on the podium.
So if that happens, Verstappen is not going to be champion.
Mathematics.
That's the amazing thing. I don't care about the maths. he needs to basically win everything, Harry.
That is
He's
true.
already 40 points behind.
True.
There's only 5 races to go. And that is the overall, we can say Verstappen, he gets his prey with all the rest of it, and he is majestic. But if anything goes wrong for him in these last 5 races, he's not going to do it.
And that's an interesting point for me. Is it going to change his mentality? Until now, he's had nothing to lose. Now he's got something to lose. So can he just fling it in and not care? I think he's going to be a bit more careful than he was before.
And someone like George Russell's going to have a right laugh with all of this. We saw it already in the sprint in Austin. All of the people around him have got to be careful. Russell won't care about it.
119 points in the last 5 races. Verstappen's going to be absolutely fine. That man knows better than anyone else on the grid where the line is, how far you can push across it, and still come back shining of roses. Shining of roses? Smelling of roses? I don't know. Mixing up my metaphors.
I was going to gloss over it, but don't worry.
No, don't worry.
Right, we've still got a couple of minutes to go, but full time at Forest, Charlie Slater.
It is Forest 2, Porto 0. The perfect start to the Sean Dyche era as Forest win for the first time since the opening day of the season and keep a clean sheet for the first time in 21 matches. 2 Forest penalties, 1 in each half, 1 from Morgan Gibbs-White, the other Igor Jesus. They also have VAR to thank for the second of those and disallowing a Porto equaliser for offside. But Dyche ball is back with a bang, and Nottingham Forest are up and running, finally, after beating Porto 2-0.
Huge evening for Nottingham Forest. To Crystal Palace, full-time, Mark Scott.
Palace 0, Ike Larnaca 1. Riyad Baric's fine strike early in the second half after a bad mistake from the Palace youngster JD Camvo winning it for the Cypriot side. Palace had a host of excellent chances to level, but were so wasteful in front of goal. Mateta and Nketiah both guilty of passing up massive openings. So Palace's first home game in a major European competition proper ends in a disappointing defeat. Palace 0, Ike Larnaca 1.
Thanks, Mark. Right, I think that just about does us here on 5 Live F1. I feel previewed. I feel ready for the weekend to come now. Thank you very much, Jolyon Palmer, Andrew Benson and Rebecca Clancy. Lots more F1 action to come your way on the 5 Live network throughout the weekend. Sunday's race will be right here on 5 Live. Lights out at 8 p.m. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Up next on 5 Live will be Tony Livesey. That's after your latest BBC News.
The voice of the UK.